Hello,
Good morning.
welcome to Sable BooKnight, episode 8. And today we are going to talk about self editing. So I'm Tanya,
I'm Tyrant.
and together we are TNT Writing Dynamite. All right,
You're
so
right.
I will let you kick this off.
Okay. Editing. You don't start editing until you've written the whole damn thing.
Good point.
This is something I have had people come to me with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 chapters, and they've asked me all kinds of constructual and other questions, and I went, wait a minute, you haven't finished? And they go, no, then done, we're done. Finish the project. All right? Finish the project. Um, this is critically important. If you do not finish the project, the whole novel, or a short story, or novella, or novelette, whatever you're writing, if you don't complete it, editing will most likely derail you. Remember, I tell people, okay, you need to have your internal critic and your editor. You got to take your critic and you got to stick them in a box and have your editor sit on the box and like about 100 to 400 yards away from you while you write your story. Well, there's a reason your editor has to be out there. And so does all the other editors around you. Now, I do know of people who write their story a chapter at a time, take it to their writing group, and they read out the chapter and get feedback. But these are always plotters. And I've never heard a successful person who pantses do this. Now, it doesn't mean it isn't happening. It doesn't mean someone listening isn't that person. I'm just saying in my experience, which is limited to my experience. Again, if it doesn't work for you, or if it doesn't say, like you're listening to a piece of advice, you're like, no, that isn't right for me, then it isn't right for you. This, or, and this does happen, you think to yourself, well, that isn't right for me. And then a year later, you hear the same piece of advice again, same person, same piece of advice. You go, wait a minute, because now it fits for you. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
it's not just what you hear, but when you hear it. If you've never completed a single short story, why would you worry about LY words?
Yeah, and I think like it depends on where you are with your journey. I know for me, if I like I'm a pantser, and if I go to a writing group and read out just chapter one, even if I'm not done, I think what I'm looking for is more storyline and character related rather than the actual editing of, the line, the sentences, the wording, all of that.
You're not a beginning author though. You've been
No.
writing for a while.
Yes.
And I guess I should have made that distinction.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think there is a big difference. Like,
Yeah.
if you're new to writing, I would say start with a short story
Yeah.
and finish the short story before you bring it to your writing group.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah, because I'll have the plot in my head. I'm a pantser. I'll have an idea of where it's going, but my idea of a plot is I'm my character is leaving the house and driving to Calgary and has to be there by the 14th. That's my plot. And then I let the characters drive the story. In that case, it would be literally if they're taking a car, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah. So, editing. Write the whole thing and read it out. Okay, the read it out loud. I like to read out loud. If I'm struggling with a piece, I will read it out loud to myself, by myself in the house. Sometimes the cat comes and looks at me, sometimes not. Dapper used to come over and purr at me when I was reading. I do miss that. And Navi thinks I'm weird. She just kind of looks over at you like, what are you doing? She doesn't come over and investigate. Then, for me, so this is self-editing. I've written the piece. Every time I write I'm working on a piece, I reread a page or two. Sometimes, depending how long I've left it, I reread right up to where I am, like I reread the whole thing, and then I write forward. So it's like that is my, what's the word I'm looking for? My ritual. Some people, because you have to get back into the writing mode of the piece, and some people, me, it's a hot cup of tea. and then I reread a couple pages to a whole chapter.
Yeah, I think that works well. Now, do you feel that there is a difference between reading something out loud and listening to it being read to you?
Yes. You have to train your ears. This is something really hard, and for some reason, I thought people who listen to audiobooks would be really good at this. But so far I haven't noticed the difference. You When you're listening to an audiobook, you're listening to the story, you're in the flow, you're not critiquing word choice, structure, language. You're not tearing it apart. That's the other warning. Once you start listening to stories being read aloud for the purpose of editing or feedback, even listening to audiobooks, I think, will change. It's like for us, when you read a book, you're enjoying the book, but you might stop and go, oh, that was a really good passage, or oh, that wasn't done very well, or oh, she's done like word repeating, or oh, you know what I mean. You're behind the screen, as it were. And so I don't know if training your ear for editing, people would enjoy that with, yeah. One thing I do think is wonderful though is you can have your computer read a piece out to you. So you can be doing
Yeah.
something else or just holding the piece in your hand. I have notes. Holding the piece in your hand and listen to the computer read it out in a monotone voice. And you will catch stuff. And
Yeah, I use that process after I've done like a thorough edit. That's one of my final stages is having the computer read it back to me because sometimes it's as simple as there's a spelling mistake or a missing word or a misused word. Well, maybe not the misused if it's pronounced the same way, but I find that that really helps catch those final glitches.
mhm. Yeah, it really does. So, you've written the piece, be it a short story, a novelette, a novella, a novel, a big hork and small dog chihuahua killer. Like you've written this piece, right? You've gone from anywhere from 5,000 words to 195,000 words. You have this tome sitting there done, or this little piece that's sitting there. I will argue this, and a lot of people roll their eyes at me, but I will argue this. You put it away and you clean your palate. You clean your mental palate. However, cleaning the palate is for you. So for me, cleaning the palate is to go for walks outside. It is read something somebody else has written that I'm looking forward to reading and start a new project. That's how I clean my palate.
Yeah, I think that's really good. So what about the fine details of
I'm not there yet.
self-editing? Okay, you're not there
Yeah,
yet.
so
Gotcha.
I've let it rest for a week, 2 weeks, a month, however long it needs. Then I need, not the piece, because this is me for cleaning the palette. Open the drawer. It doesn't have to be a drawer. It could be a file folder. It could be wherever you have it. Take it out, and then I start reading it. And I do a general. My first read through is a general. For me, it's a general read. I'll catch little things. So yeah, read out loud. Edit. Okay, I like editing in parts. And the first thing I start with is chapter headings, making sure my chapters actually start where I think they start. So as I'm reading it through, because I've been doing this for a long time, I do a bunch of things. So I'm looking for cliches, AI, which is author intrusion, order of events, and order of events is two things. So I'll put down order of events, but if I'm editing someone else's piece, and I'll try to remember to make the note of which one it is. So order of events is the actual layout of the sentence. Caroline laughed after Tom came in through the outside door and told her the joke. Well, that statement is weird. That's just me coming up with a statement. I'm trying to come up with order of events, and it's not. What's the term? It's not. It's you actually have to stop reading forward and decipher what just happened.
It's about the flow, I think.
Yeah, that completely stops your flow. It stops things because you have to
Mhm.
stop and go, wait, she laughed because John came in from outside and told her a joke? Well, the door opened, John came in laughing, he said, and then she tells her the joke, right? And then she laughs. That makes more sense, and you don't stop. You just keep reading forward. If she laughed because John came in from outside and told her a joke, you have to literally stop moving forward and decipher what just happened. So that's my, when normally I say order of events, for a new writer, that's what I'm usually finding. In a writer who's been writing for a while, I might make a note. It'll be a plot note. I do this for myself too. Order of events lowers tension. So in that case, I'll say like, if Caroline finds out in chapter 2 that Mark is having an affair with the telephone lady, and but or instead she finds out in chapter 31, but if she finds out in chapter 2 that he's having this affair, that could really increase tension and makes more sense for your plot outline. And that's also an order of events. Have her find out or believe or, like move up. So for instance, if you're 2/3 way through the book and that's when you bring in the supernatural element, I'm saying no. No,
It's
your
too
order of
late.
events
You
here
need
is
to
wrong.
make it clear that your
Yeah.
world has supernatural in it.
Yeah, and you have to start in the first chapter. So I will do that. If it's a tension issue, my story doesn't have any tension. Well, your book has 50 chapters, and in chapter 39, we discover that the guy's having an affair, or she believes he's having an affair, and she's not sure in chapter 39. Well, that's because that's when your story started. Your story didn't, all these first chapters were just establishing setting and stuff. That all can go. And I've done that to people, That one
Yes.
lady, I took her first 3 chapters out, and I said, no, this is where your story starts. She had an entire chapter, very nice woman, beautiful writer, wonderful. I mean, her use of language was gorgeous. And yet, she had an entire chapter, almost, I think it was, I want to say 16 pages. This is single-sided, double-spaced, though. Um, doing laundry and household chores. And I'm like, no. Well, I have to show her in her regular. I said, I don't care. Read about a lady doing laundry. You've lost your audience. No. So her third chapter is when her story started. And it was like halfway through the third chapter. And she went to a couple other people and they told her the same thing. So, yeah. So that's also order of events. Cliches. Avoid cliches like the plague.
That was good. Smooth.
Cliches are not shortcuts. I do not know why this is something that has reappeared. It has risen its ugly head yet again.
It has.
And I don't know what's going on. Now, you can leave cliches in dialogue because editing dialogue is not editing narrative. Dialogue is different. If you have a single character who's super annoying and speaks in cliches, that's fine as long as it's consistent. And that's what they're doing. Otherwise, no, gonzo. Yes, I have no idea why this is resurfaced. I thought everybody knew the rule about cliches, and yet I am seeing them all over the place. Edit in parts. Yeah, editing in parts.
So, like, do you take one chapter and go through all these different stages of editing until it is finalized?
I used to years ago. I don't now. I do a lot of pre-editing as I write my own work. When I do that reread through, I'm looking for things that catch me. For whatever reason, when I do basically it'll be a couple pages and plus usually whatever I wrote the day before, or a page and what I wrote the day before. I'll catch LOI words, word repetition. I'll catch these things. I find it much, okay, first off, you can't really edit your own work. We all know this. You can do some basic editing and some pretty good fixing. When it really comes down to editing, you're much better off editing other people's work and having friends that you can swap pieces with.
Yes, that makes a big difference. I think that I have made the mistake of just doing like self-editing, pro writing aid, have it listen to it, like have the computer play it back to me. And I'm sure there's stuff that I have missed, but I think that's usually for my shorter stuff. But Not
We
anymore.
miss. Yeah, I fill in words. I was horrible for a while of dropping the word the, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'd usually had it in the beginning. It was you, it was a couple other people who pointed out, shouldn't there be a the here? Shouldn't there be a... It's like, oh, yeah. But I would read it, and the the would, and it was when I would take it to, and be reading it at that group out loud, I'd go, oh, yeah, the, oh, yeah.
Yeah, my word is back. Like going back to the doorway or returning or going back across the room and saying she crossed the room. Like I have this bad habit. I'm catching it now. So, but I think we all have one thing that we need to be mindful of. And if you keep finding the same mistake, you almost have to like write it down and have it beside you so that while you're writing, you'd be like, no, I can't do that.
Well, I used to have everybody write their list. Remember, I said, make your word list. What's the list of words you overuse all the time? Me, for years, it took me a long time until I made my list, and actually I had it clipped to the top of my computer, my word list.
It's smart. Yes.
And I look at it, and then I start reading, and I go, oh. And yeah, that was although. For some reason, I had although everywhere. That was the hardest one. However, and although, but although was the one I struggled getting rid of.
It makes it sound too professional when you're writing like fiction.
Yes, and I blame the fact that I took courses and was trained myself to be a personal assistant in business. I think that was one of the reasons I did law language, lots of law legalese, and I wonder if that's not what made me struggle so hard with those kind of phrases. Yeah, so edit in parts. So I do character sheets. I do a quick sheet and then a thorough sheet. Only on my POV, my point of view characters, and only on the important characters. And my short sheet is the picture, not always, but usually a picture, some basics about their background, phrases, and physical characteristics. And one of the physical characteristics is, are they a touching person? Are they a listening person? Because remember, we have 5 senses. And I have read far too many short stories, novels, and these are published and not published, where apparently you just see things and hear things. You never smell things, you never feel things. There's no tactileness to this world. There's no physicality of the world. That is something that bothers me. It's like a person walking through it was an author, and she had gone somewhere in Africa to go see animals. But they'd gone to this village. A bridge had been washed out. Something had happened, and they had to go somewhere. And she had written some medieval stories, and she was doing an interview. This is like 10, 15 years ago. I can't remember. She wrote medieval stuff. It was a medieval story anyway. And she could not believe the smells. The smells overwhelmed her when they came into the town with all the animals and walking by the wet market where it shocked her. And then she had gone to, it's an eastern country in Europe, and she had gone into the butcher shop and just froze because there was a sheep head and a pig's head staring at her, and you could buy a sheep's head. But it was the smells. There was garlic, and there was that coppery scent of blood. There was these different scents. And she put her hand down, and everything was worn with a smoothness because the shop had been there for like 75, 80 years. And she was talking about this, and she said, I hadn't realized the importance of tactileness and sense of smell, how it puts you in place. Because smelling that brought her right back to that African wet market. A wet market is where you go and you buy, animals are literally cutting up. You go and you buy your meat. Sometimes live. You find them in China, and you find them everywhere. People who've gone to the farm. I brought people out years ago, and she didn't know cows had a bovine smell. And I said, yes. Like, she understood cow poop. Manure, you're cowing,
Right.
you're smelling
Yeah.
the cow poop. And she understood, but she hadn't realized when she walked out into the pasture, you really didn't smell cow poop unless they just pooped. And even then, in a few moments, that smell was gone. I said, well, yeah, because the soil's full of bacteria that literally, eats it. And we ticked over a couple dried patties, and she saw the little golden bugs running around. So those are dung beetles. And she thought, well, I thought they would smell. I said, no, dried out patties don't smell. That's why kids would pick them up and fling it at each other like frisbees. I mean, come on. Which she then proceeded to do, which had me going, okay, if it's something you
Yeah.
never did, go ahead with cow potty. And yeah, and then the cows wouldn't let her pet them, except for Puff. And she was quite amazed. Her and her friend, they were quite amazed. Yeah, she thought the smell would be. She didn't know what the smell would be, but she thought it would be stronger and more stinky, more poopy. And she was quite surprised. I said, yes. So
Yeah.
when you think of people having livestock under their homes or in their homes, everyone thinks of urine and poop. Yes, those smells are strong. But they forget that there's also the healthy bovine or sheep, or like they have their own smells that are very distinct. And she said she was going to use that more in her writing. She wrote romances, so I don't know
Yeah.
how
At
it
what
worked.
point that would depends on where the scenery, right? Like
Yeah,
the environment.
yeah,
But yeah, it definitely brings the reader further into the story and where like visualizing the scene when you have the sense.
yeah. I read was it Anne Boleyn or the other Anne Boleyn girl, or it's an older novel years ago, and she puts on a brocade dress, and she could smell. The dress smelled clean, and she'd been washed and scrubbed, and it smelled vaguely of roses
Hmm.
because they'd scented it with rose petals. But she's touching the brocade, feeling the fineness of the cloth and the fineness of the sewing and the smoothness of the silk threads. And in the moment when she's smelling the roses, I was there. Like I thought that was the most amazing out of the whole story. That's the one piece that I'll never forget. The power of that moment, because she was now an actual princess. Like she was becoming an actual queen. And I thought to myself, wow. And they sewed it on her because it was accurate. So she's there and she's standing and she's feeling that they tighten it up and they're stitching. And when they're done, she takes her hands and she runs them down the stitch line on the sides. And she says it was so fine, and yet they were so quick. These beautiful ladies who wasn't the other Anne Boleyn. I think it was the same author, or the book came out at the same time. But she's a lady in waiting, like uh, now. And but she had dreamed of being a seamstress, of because they're so clean and their hands are always so clean, and they were so amazing. These women, they were always so well put together, and just so clean and above her, because you can't have dirty hands when you're working on material. And now,
Right.
and then she became a lady. I think she's a lady in waiting or something at this point. But the prince has noticed her, and this other king has noticed her, and she knows everything has changed. And that she gets this. So instead of wearing her more plain clothes, she gets this beautiful brocade dress to wear. Yeah, you're there. You're in the scene. Her eyes are closed, and she's feeling their hands, and they're sewing, and her hands are clean, and she's. Anyways, it was a great piece. Great piece. And it wasn't the lye soap. That was the other thing. She had scrubbed herself so many times with lye soap. And she thought, I could never wash off the smell of pigs. And I thought, wow,
It's
yeah.
pretty strong. Yeah.
Anyways, sorry, back to
That's
this.
okay.
The use of your senses, as I probably just shown, can really impact a reader and really bring the setting to life. Because when you're editing, like I like doing one of my POVs at a time. I go through the whole book, or I do chapter by chapter, depending on my mood. And I will go through and say, if this is chapter with male lead, I will go through constantly glancing at my little checklist for my male lead. I don't glance as much as I used to, obviously. But this also helps me with the character's voice. I do notice, even now, if I do not do that step, my voices will be. You can't easily tell who's speaking.
Yes, like in the one that you edited for me.
Yes, and it was funny for me because you had in the beginning you were clearly keeping their voices distinct, but then you
That's called
That's like,
novel November writing. Because you're
hmm,
always like rushing and yeah.
yes. But you did a good job. And
Well,
it's not a
thank you.
hard fix. It's actually
No.
quite an easy fix.
Yeah,
It's
and I
just to
think
do it.
but I think that's a good idea, like especially in my case for Red Rain, to go through the chapters for each character because I do have it segregated and I can easily click on
Yeah.
them with the navigation panel because I have the names listed. So I think that'll be a decent fix and a good way of editing.
Yeah. And it goes quickly. Uh, avoid cliches. I have notes. Uh, setting. Is your setting clear? Is the reader in the setting? Is there an active sense of place? So every once in a while, you'll read a story. You'll be reading along, and it could be happening anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And you're like, okay, this is boring. It could be a great story between two characters who the dialogue is fantastic, but there's no sense of place. And people, especially people who don't, they'll say, you know what? It had some good ideas, but it just didn't hold me. And usually it's a lack of a sense of place. Place is terribly important for human beings. We are a reflection of the environment we've evolved in, but also the environment we live in. We are a reflection, and our environment is a reflection of us. So right now, my environment is chaotic and crazy with a lack of a working bathroom. So that is a reflection of myself right now.
I'm making myself notes as a reminder because I am editing. So
Yeah, setting. So people talk about an active setting. Now, it's easy to have an active setting if you're dealing with someone walking through a blizzard in Saskatchewan in January because they're going to freeze to death if they're not careful. It's easy to have an active setting in the desert or on the ocean or in space. And what's interesting to me is people will say, "Oh, I wrote this book and I wrote 5 versions. This version's a Western, this is a mystery, this is..." And you're like, no, 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 no. This one's sci-fi. And it's like, no. I read this fellow's short story, this was quite a few years ago, and I said, this isn't. If you remove the space elements you put in, this doesn't change the story at all. This setting, this isn't even a story in place. This is just you haven't done the
space that
story
just
yet.
happens to be a piece of it. It's not actually impacting the storyline in any way.
Yeah. And if you're writing a romance and you can take the romantic elements and the story still works, it's not a romance. If you're writing a science fiction and you take the science out of it and it doesn't impact the story, it's not science fiction. This is something. Also, the subtlety of place. So if a place is if it's happening in a person's apartment or in their city or town, there are elements of that city or town that need to be in the story to give us verisimilitude. Did I say that right? Verisimilitude?
I have no idea.
That means it feels real. The smells, the noises, dog shit on the sidewalk, garbage piled up, the smell of garbage, the rat running by. If you see a rat running by in a story, if I were to describe for you a scene where you're walking on cracked pavement and a rat runs by, your first assumption is you're in a town or a city. Cracked pavement or rat running by. If I say, and then John walked over to the mill, through the trees to the mill, you'd be like, what? He was just on cracked pavement. Because the sense of place is not, there's no verisimilitude. It doesn't feel like a real place. If you say, as John walked through from the edge of town, and the town is a dying town. Well, you can tell us that without telling that. You can show us that. You can put us into the dying town, looking across at what used to be Farber's. I don't know, general store, and the windows broken, and the old pharmacy burnt out, a burnt out husk, and you have this, and he wonders as he walks by if it's just his imagination or if he could still smell the smoke from the fire from 5 years ago. That would be an interesting, and the police never even bothered to come down, and the fire department never showed up. Well, if the fire department doesn't show up and your town's building, your town's on fire, it's a dead town, right?
Yeah.
Like, but there's also a sense of danger there. If you say the old pharmacy burnt down 5 years ago and neither police nor firemen showed up because no one cares if the town of whatever went up in flames, you now have instilled a sense of danger in your environment and your story that is part of the place.
Yeah.
And your reader's going to go, wait a minute, if something happens to our main character here, John, help may not come because of where he is. And that gives you this active sense of place, right? It's there, it's part of the story.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Character. What do you want people to notice? Your first introduction of character is critical. Okay? You can say everything you want about your character. You could have two people in your story say, oh, Martha and Tom are talking about John. John is wonderful. John is the most honest person we ever know. John is this, and sprinkles on top. And he comes in, stumbles, and vomits over the floor because he's 3 sheets to the wind. You're like, I don't think John is any of those things, Martha. And Tom, I think John's a drunk. And that sense that John's a drunk will now be an underlying base of your reader. So if you don't want to show John as a raging alcoholic, you don't have him come in and do that. Hero. Here is something that I've tried to explain to people. So I had a person who said, okay, no one likes my story. I think my main character is an idiot. So the introduction to the main character occurred literally in the first chapter, which is where it should. This young girl trips on the bus and falls between the bus seats. Gets up, falls out of the bus, knocking and dropping all her supplies everywhere. And she gets up and she yells at them and off they go. And he spends the next 5 chapters telling us what a great athlete she is. No, she's a raging klutz and she's stupid. And we know this because when we were introduced to her, she was a raging klutz who was stupid. And she's stupid because she's calling them weird names that a high schooler wouldn't use. She can't seem to get herself organized. She can't put her stuff all together. She keeps losing things. Literally in the first chapter, we are shown a person who is also, she is struggling with basic ideas and concepts in class in the first chapter. So she's a unintelligent, lower than average, klutz who is this great athlete and is going to be valedictorian. Like, no.
Yeah, no, that
No.
doesn't line up together.
No. So your first introduction is critical. What is the impression? How are you going to show the base of this person's character? It may even surprise them. So when you first introduce them, say, what is the purpose of this introduction? What is it I need my reader to know about this character, even if they don't know it about themselves? So I did a rewrite of a chapter. So what happened is this lady is selling a house. She is a real estate agent. These people have robbed. They have a hurt member. They're in a panic mode, and they drive. I think it was state lines or something. And they drive into this garage. They're parked there. They go into the house, which is for sale, and she shows up. And the older couple are sitting in the kitchen, terrified, and she walks in with this younger couple to show them the house. And the gentleman says, "Oh, my son has come to stay with us." And she thinks, well, that's weird because they have no kids. And this man's looking at her, and she gets all this danger vibes. So she says, so this day would not be a good day to show the house? And he goes, the old man is like, he's terrified. He's like, no. And she turns to the couple and says, I'm sorry, we'll have to delay the showing. Walks them to the door and takes them to their car and then comes back. While she's out there, she has her cell phone and dials 911. And she comes back into the house with the phone in her coat pocket and says, well, now that your son's here, he can watch the house. But can I take you to the office to sign the papers? Because I forgot them again, and it's just easier if I take you guys. Because there was no way she was leaving them in this situation. Now, she doesn't think of herself as a hero. In the original, the guy jumps up, grabs her, and the two people run off. And I was like, no. He said, but I want her to be, like, she has this hero-ness. She doesn't believe she's brave. Now, she knows this old couple. She's been working to sell their house. She helped stage it. She helped them. Like, there's a lot of background. We didn't need any of that. So that whole first part of the chat, the whole first like 7-8 pages, gone. I said that can come later. That can all come later. Right now, show her worrying about them. Now, he said, I want to show that she's smart, and I want to show that she's brave, and that she doesn't realize how smart she is, and she doesn't realize how brave she is. So when she's on her phone and she's talking to the couple and they're driving away, right, off they go. She has her phone against her chest, slides it into her pocket open. She says, I'm going back in for them. And the lady on the phone says, don't do that. Walk away. We're saying the police. She goes, no, I have to go back in. Like, I can't leave them. And she slides her phone in her pocket. She puts it on mute and slides it in her pocket. So you can't hear them, but they can hear her, and she goes back in. It was a subtle change from her shaking and dropping her phone and the guy coming out and her kicking it under the car, which I thought was good, but I said, have her do that later. Have her, like, let's make this subtle change and have her go. So she goes back into the house and she tells them, why don't you come? We'll get the paperwork signed and we'll pick up. And she says, well, we can pick up lunch. Right? And anyway, we rewrote that opening, and I really upped the tension. And she starts noticing things, and I like the way he did it. He did a really good job in her noticing things.
Nice.
And the male hero is POV. He is this gentleman who does yard work and works on the houses for her, and she really likes him, but doesn't know how to tell him. His wife had died, and she doesn't want to intrude. It's been like 3 years. But she doesn't want to intrude. There's never the right time between the two of them. Also, her family doesn't approve because he has a record. I loved it. I loved the way the story opened. And it had a lot. It was great, but I needed to move the opening in 7 pages. 7, yeah. We redid that opening. And the funny part was he kept stalling out, and he came and he phoned me, texted me. Anyways. I found out months later, months, because he had come to the group only a few times to our group. And he said, yeah, no, we fixed it. It worked. It's wonderful. I went, okay. He said, but it fixed it in his head. Because that first introduction, especially so all your characters, your POVs, have to have a flaw, a lie that they believe about themselves, and something, and a truth about themselves that they don't accept. And I don't mean, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like, she doesn't believe she's smart or that she's brave, right? He believes in that story, which we hadn't put into words, but we did put into words sitting there. No one else had came. It was just me and him, and which I thought was so cool. And we basically sat there for 2 hours, and we went over this opening and just redid it to the point that, yeah. Anyway. Yeah, edit differently your dialogue. Your dialogue has to be based on the character's point of view and passed around and everything. Oh, get rid of redundancies outside of dialogue. Remember, edit dialogue separate. Get rid of throwaway words, prepositional phrases, dialogue tags. If it's not said or says, it's gone. If you're writing 60,000 words, I'll give you 2 that are not said or says, okay?
You just have to remember that if you plan to turn something into an audiobook, hearing the words said over and over can feel very repetitive to a listener.
Yes. Move the name first. Don't say said Frank, say Frank said. And the reason you do that is that the word said begins to vanish if you say the name first. I don't know why. It does that in reading, and apparently it does that in listening. Again, said becomes one of those vanish words, which is good. Let it vanish. Get rid of double nouns. She sat and watched TV all day. She watched TV all day. You don't need she sat and watched TV all day. Get rid of extra adjectives, adverbs, double verbs. She got up and went over to the door. She went over to the door. You don't need to say she got up and went over to the door. She was just on the couch. We know she got up and went to go over to the door. Back to setting character. I love Stein on writing, Sol Stein's book, Stein on Writing. an editing book. It's fantastic. I recommend it. He has 10 commandments. Thou shalt not sprinkle characters into a preconceived plot, lest thou produce hackwork. In the beginning was the character, then the word, and from the character's words is brought forth the action. Thou shalt imbue thy heroes with faults and thy villains with charm, for it is the faults of the hero that bring forth his life, just as the charm of the villain is the honey which he lures in the innocent. Thy characters shall steal, kill, dishonor their parents, bear false witness, and covet their neighbors, house, wife, manservant, maidservant, ox, and ass. For the readers crave such actions, and yawn when thy characters are meek, innocent, forgiving, and peaceable. Thou shalt not saw the air with abstractions, for readers, like lovers, are attracted by particularity. That is something I am seeing a lot of too. Be precise. Do not give me, it was somewhat wonderful. No! Somewhat wonderful means nothing. It was kind of blue. Was it blue? Not kind of blue. It was either blue or it wasn't blue.
Don't make it
All right.
foggy. Yeah.
What?
Don't make it foggy.
Exactly. Thou shalt not mutter, whisper, blurt, bellow, or scream, for it is the words and not the characterization of the words that must carry their own decibels. Yes, so don't say, angry, Frank said, how dare you? No. You write, Frank said, how dare you, an exclamation point. We don't need the angry. The words need to carry it, the actions need to carry it. Better yet, Frank slammed his fist on the table. How dare you, exclamation point. Don't need, that is much better, see?
Yep.
Thou shalt infect thy reader with anxiety, stress, and tension, for those conditions that the reader deplores in life he relishes in fiction. Thy language shall be precise, clear, and bear the wings of angels, for anything less is the province of businessmen and academics, and not of writers. Thou shalt have no rest on the Sabbath, for thy character shall live in thy mind and memory, now and forever. Thou shalt not forget that dialogue is as a foreign tongue, a semblance of speech, and not a record of it, a language in which directness diminishes and obliqueness sings. Above all, thou shalt not vent thy emotions onto the reader, for thy duty is to evoke the reader's emotions, and in that most of all lies the art of the writer. Let me repeat that one, please. Above all, thou shalt not vent thy emotions onto the reader, for thy duty is to evoke the reader's emotions, and in that most of all lies the art of the writer. Okay? The thing is we have a lot of people today who preach at people. They do it in subtle and different ways. Some of them outright just and they're so pathetic in their writing and so obviously wrong that there's no semblance to real life, to actual experience. The other thing they do is they tell the reader. This is author intrusion. They stop the story. So when you're editing, if you ever see angry, Frank said, or Frank yelled loudly. No, ly words gone. Get rid of the ly words. Ing words. Why? Unless it's in dialogue. Why? Ly words. Unless in dialogue. Why? Kindly, he said. What does that mean? Kindly, he said. What does that mean? You can show me. How about you show me? If you show me, I'm in the story. If you stop the story to tell me, I'm not in the story. One of my favorite books is this. Editor proof you are writing 21 steps to the clear prose publishers and agents crave. This I got decades ago, like a long time ago. It has lists and step-by-step editing advice, phrasing, how to get rid of foggy words. I got it a long time ago. It was recommended to me by watching an interview with a writer who was talking about Stein on writing. I'm trying to be quick. Okay. Oh yeah, make a backup of your work. While editing, make a backup of your work. LY words, ing word, author intrusion, obvious point of view slips, tense. Watch the tense. Don't slip from
Yes.
present tense to past tense or vice versa, except if you're doing it with intent. See, you can break every one of these words if you're doing it with intent because you know how to break the rules then. So if you have all your dialogue is in present tense, but all their narrative is in past tense, that's fine, as long as it's continuous and it stays the same throughout the whole piece. Get rid of filter words. Things like almost, rather, somewhat, quite, and somehow. No, none of those. Get rid of them. It is or it isn't. That and who. If referring to a person, then it is who. If referring to a thing, then it is that. He was the driver who drove the truck. Not it was the driver that drove the truck. No. Remove redundant phrases. Final outcome. Final and outcome have the same meaning. Actual fact. True fact. It was a true fact. No, a fact is true. I know a lot of people like to change the meaning of words today, and you can do that in dialogue. You cannot do that outside of dialogue. And the more you do it, the less trust the reader has in you. It is charlatans, people who gaslight, and people who are trying to sell something do that. And that's one of the ways for you to quickly figure out when they're playing with words that they're trying to pull one over on you. Added bonus. No, it's added or it's a bonus. Either way, it means simple. Close proximity. Proximity means close. Protest against. You can protest or be against it. It's the same word. Repeat again. Or my favorite one, unthaw. So you're refreezing it? Are you refreezing it?
It's
Either
funny.
like I always stop and say, "Don't do that. You're going to poison people." And they look at me like I've lost my mind. Character consistency, but show growth. Make the growth make sense. When you're writing a man, they use I, me, you, him, her predominantly. When a woman, they tend to use us, we, are, ours. You can reverse those if they're, well, no. If the woman is gay and is very dominant, she might be using I, me, you, her. Okay, who is this character? What do they really want? Why will they get it or won't they? What's the outcome? What is the purpose of the chapter? Why did you write this chapter? Because I've overwritten in years past and had to cut out a lot of stuff that it didn't do nothing.
I think we've all done that at some point or another.
Oh, yeah. Filter words. Janet Burroway, she wrote a book called On Writing. Excellent book. Remove the following words outside of dialogue. Okay? See, look, hear, know, realize, start, begin, began, begin. Feel, notice, decide, wonder, remember, think, touch, watch, see, can, understand, sound, saw, felt, knew, could, tell, and ponder. These were my words that I had to get rid of. I was overusing them. Okay? I mean, other people, you have your own list, right? She felt a sinking feeling as she realized she'd forgotten her purse back at the cafe across the street. She saw cars, bumpers. Now, this is a rewritten paragraph to show editing, okay? So she felt a sinking feeling as she realized she'd forgotten her purse back at the cafe across the street. She saw cars filing past, their bumpers end to end. She heard the impatient honk of horns and wondered how she could quickly cross the busy road before someone took off with her bag. But the traffic seemed impenetrable, and she decided to run to the intersection at the end of the block. Sarah's stomach sank. Her purse, she'd forgotten it back at the cafe across the street. Cars filled past, their bumpers end to end. Horns honked. Could she make it across the road before someone took off with her bag? She ran past the stream of traffic toward the intersection at the end of the block. more tension. We're much more into it. I would even edit it further now because I'm older. Other words that are often should be removed, and this especially in my case, this is a lot of people I've noticed the same thing: up, down, reached, and just, the, sudden, of.
Clue words.
Yeah, I'm really bad with and, just, and sudden. And of was one I was throwing of in a lot of places. But again, make your own list. Motivation, setting, character voice, and suspense. Okay, did that make sense? I hope that made sense.
Definitely. I think it's good to have yourself all of these lists of things that you need to watch for, like written out or typed out, and have it beside you when you're doing editing so that you have something to reference as a reminder.
Yeah, some of these are 20 years old. Some of those lists, I'm much better now. The thing is
Yeah.
once you start noticing them, then it becomes subconscious after a while, because you have your lists, and like, because I'm not bad with those words anymore. But it took me 10 years to get not bad with those words,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And also dividing things. My problem now is I have to be careful. My characters, when speaking, it's internal and external dialogue. Internal dialogue should always be true to the character, much more than external dialogue. And the external dialogue should adjust depending on who they're talking to.
Yeah.
If they're talking to a co-worker, they can use language they will not use with mom and dad or the boss, right? Or with their friend on Saturday night. Like,
Yeah.
and it's fun to show. I think it's fun when I read a character in their head, they're like, oh God, here comes that idiot. What's he going to break now? Hi, sir. How you doing?
Yeah. The professionalism versus what you're thinking about that person. I
Yeah.
know that feeling well. Okay,
All right.
well,
I
I
hope
think we should
we're
wrap
done.
it up for the day. So this was self-editing, and next we can talk about editing
This was
other
the other book
people's. Oh,
I really liked. It's called Revision and Self-Editing for James Scott Bell, Techniques for Transforming Your First Draft into a Finished Novel. As you can tell, lots of highlights and things. Again,
yeah,
these two books, this is if you can't only get one, I'd get this one. If you could get both, I'd recommend them. But again, years ago, I had no groups, I had no one to go. There was no one around, so I had to self-teach.
yes.
Critters. It's an online group where you practice editing other people's work. And if you have one of these lists, I
Switchers?
recommend it. Critters, yes, as in to criticize. Critters, Critters. I really do recommend it just for practicing editing. I did that for a long time.
Okay.
Anyways, I hope this helps people, but you need to find someone to help you with the second stage of editing.
Yes, definitely. Well, if you have any thoughts on self-editing, leave a comment down below. And if you have any other suggestions for podcast topics, also send us an email at sablebooknight@outlook.com. So thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, night, or whatever, and happy writing.
Story comes first. Bye.
Bye.